Alright, sup fellow space fans, welcome back to the Path of Rage and our Star Citizen weekly briefing. As tends to be the case with CIG and Star Citizen, it's either famine or feast, and this week is no different. Last week we had very little to talk about in a short episode, and this week we have a lot to go over, including a ton of info that CIG dropped into our laps about changes to the medical system and how medbeds are going to work in the verse. Like I said, we've got a lot to go into, so let's get to it. So, as I said, CIG dropped a ton of info in our labs this week. We have a update to the Squadron 42 newsletter, which was kind of cool, but not what I was hoping for. We do have, as I said, the massive changes to the medical gameplay, and we also have the Persistent Universe monthly update to go through. Now, in order to keep this video from being insanely long, I'm not going to read out everything bit for bit, but I'll do my best to summarize what's in these notes and updates to us, and I'll link the full pages in the description below so you guys can check them out for yourselves, just in case I miss getting something across. Starting off with the Squadron 42 newsletter, I was actually expecting a bit more. What we got was a image of the Odin system, which Squadron 42 takes place in, and cutouts and bulletins and kind of screenshots of the locations in this system that we're going to be visiting and that are going to be part of the storyline. Obviously, there's not really a lot to go on here. I'll link it in the description below. As I said before, I've got it posted up here for a couple of seconds in front of you so you can take a quick look at it. But yeah, I was hoping for a bit more, considering Squadron 42 is what I'm looking forward to, but it is nice to have a little bit of information. Anyway, moving on. Now, I won't bury the lead. I'm going to go right into the medical gameplay updates, and then we'll do the monthly report. Now, CIG has changed the way the medical system works in its entirety. Now, it's always been the case in Star Citizen that injuries have had multiple tiers, from Tier 3 minor injuries to Tier 1 severe injuries. Each of these injuries have always required a bit different type of treatment. The lower difficulties you'll get a reduction in health pool, some audible wheezing, slower health regeneration, like stuff like that, or stamina regeneration. As the tiers go up in the injury levels, you'll have added effects going on, like limping, audible grunts of pain, a difficulty aiming, with Tier 1 of course being the worst, where you could be completely incapacitated and unable to stand or crouch, that you can't move at all and need to be rescued. And all of these injuries will be treated differently, not only with on-site treatments but also with the med beds. As before, for the easier Tier 3, Tier 2 injuries, you have your med pens that just heal your general health, but you also have 5 others that heal specific things, like broken legs, to make it so that your movement isn't hindered for a while. You still have the problem, but it allows you to ignore the effects for a little while. Eventually, though, you come to a point where you will have sustained significant damage. Your health meter has hit 0, and you're on the ground, you're unable to move or function, and that's when you become incapacitated. Once you're incapacitated, that timer starts counting down until you actually die. So if you've got nearby friends, you're playing this online with friends instead of solo like I tend to do, they can administer a med pen or use the med gun to get you back on your feet. And if not, you'll be able to, and 4.3.1, you'll be able to call for a rescue beacon, which will trigger a mission that other players can take to come and get you. These have been disabled in the game for the last little while, because of the mission system, so I don't know when that's actually going to go online. It will be with 4.3.1, we'll have to see. But say your friends or somebody accepting a beacon does come to your rescue or whatnot, they can either use the med pens and whatnot, or if it's a bigger difficulty or a higher level injury, like a Tier 1 injury, They can get you to a ship-based medical bed, or they can transfer you all the way back to a station or whatever where they land in the hangar, and they can put you into the medical elevator there, which will bring you to a med bed and you get healed. And if that incapacitation timer runs out, that's when you die. You respawn at your home base and your corpse is left behind to be looted. Most of that has pretty much been par for the course with medical gameplay, aside from the missions, like I said, for the past couple of years, really. Like, none of that is new. The changes, however, the massive changes that I talked about, come around because of the medical beds. Just like the tiers of injuries, there's also tiers of med beds. And the tier 3 one can't revive fully like the tier 1 med bed can. Now the big change is that med beds will no longer work indefinitely anymore. Right now, the way it is in the game, not in the PTU, in the live, if you have a med bed on a ship, you can set that as your respawn point if it's a tier 1. And you can use it repeatedly. Same thing if it's not a regeneration bed, but you can go back to get healed. Right now, you can do it over and over and over again, provided you've got it close enough to whatever you're doing to take the injuries that you can get back and forth to it. Now, med beds require a resource to run. Just like the multi-tool and the medical tool both have cartridges that need to be reloaded after you use them, now medical beds will have the same thing. They will use a certain amount of SCU of med gel, and each bed can hold a different amount. For a tier 3, it's 100. For tier 2, it's 200. And for a tier 1 med bed, it's 400 SCU of med gel, or not SCU, CSCU of med gel. It's a smaller unit. You actually have to physically put this stuff into the med bed and refill it. So if you take your, say, Ursa Medevac, the Nursa, on your ship to you to an outpost, and you set that bed to revive you if you die, you'll only get to do it maybe once, maybe twice, unless you've got more of this med gel to replenish it with. No more revolving door, just respawn over and over and over again. Every time you heal, it costs med gel to heal that. And healing injuries is a flat 50 CSCU regardless of how severe the injuries are. There's no cost to temporarily stabilizing injuries above what the medical bed can heal. But regardless, minor injuries in a tier 3 bed, minor and moderate injuries in a tier 2 bed, and minor, moderate, and severe injuries in a tier 3 bed, they all cost this 50 CSCU med gel. Now that's to heal. To actually regenerate if you've been killed is 100, no matter which tier you have. It's 100 CSCU. So if you've got a tier 3 med bed, it only holds 100 CSCU. You can only revive in that med bed once. And then you have to recharge the med bed so you can do it again, which means that you're going to have to spend the money to bring extra resources on your ship for the medbed. Again, it's not a free respawn button anymore. And then, of course, because it is CIG and they like to sell ships, they list off the 5 ships that you can get that have medevac and triage stations in them, which, of course, is the RSI Apollo medevac and Apollo triage. You can get the Anvil Terrapin medevac, the Drake Cutlass Red, the Anvil Pisces C8R, and the RSI Ursa medevac, like I said, the Nursa, the ground vehicle. Now, each one of these has a different type of bed in it, so if you're looking to get one in-game, figure out which one is the most appropriate for your needs. But keep in mind, like I said, this is huge in how medical and especially regeneration on certain types of ships is going to happen in the verse. Now, it's not shown anywhere in the design brief that I've linked in the description, but I have been reading on the forums, I think in the Evocati, but certainly on social, is that 100 CSCU, pardon me, of Metagel is going to cost 100,000 AUEC. So regenning is not going to be cheap either. Like I said, if that's true, between that and how many times you can spawn and needing this stuff, this is going to put a huge damper in that whole thing of just parking a ship out of range and just allowing yourself to respawn over and over again in an FPS environment. It's a change that needs to happen, to be quite honest. Moving on now to the Persistent Universe Monthly Report for August 2025. Now, the AI content team had one thing that they were doing in particular was refactoring one of the NPC archetypes that is important to landing zone infrastructure. And when that's complete, it'll provide additional character to the various landing zones around the verse. I wonder if that means we'll eventually have NPCs in our hangars, refueling our ship, or things like that. They looked into voice packs for dynamic conversations and developing new behavior types for different types of NPCs in different areas. The AI features team worked on improving NPC weapon overheating. The logic for trigger control was reworked. They put in a fix to tackle NPCs stopping firing after their first trigger pull. They worked at improving the overall experience with the Copions, especially with fixes to stabilize how they flee. And even though it's not available in the PU yet, they put in a bug fix for NPCs executing audio triggers when they're dead. I've come across this a bunch of times in bunker missions. Everybody is dead, and I'll hear somebody going, "He's over here!" and it's a dead body. The AI tech team worked on NPC pathfinding to prevent NPCs from getting stuck and moving in a unnatural manner. AI ship behaviors were changed, and that includes when the AI is defending an area but the target is outside of it. They improved AI ship combat tactics for the strafer and the jouster behaviors, and they did some bug fixing for StarScript, optimized the subsumption initialization of AI, and added functionality to mark global function availability for the programmers listening to this. The AI game intelligence development team did programming stuff that, I don't really understand. Link in the description below for those of you who want to read it. The animation team worked on improvements to the Copion as well as a new creature. They're not saying what that is. They also created assets for that upcoming Metagel dispenser that we were talking about and made a pass on death reactions to assure they appeared as expected. Facial animation worked on capturing additional content for releases coming soon into next year, including previously captured dialogue that will soon be available in-game for brand new mission givers and additional lines for Amelia Boyd. And they're also working with the narrative team with SSN news flash reports that will be visible in-game on the monitors and the screens around the verse during timed events. The character art team progressed another armor for a new gang, and they also continued to work on variants for gameplay rewards and store items and started exploring a phase for a new heavy armor. The ship art team was working on 3 unannounced ships throughout August. They're all in various stages from white box to gray box. The Anvil Paladin progressed to the level of detail 0 stage, with the gray box gate review now closed, and the exterior was slightly behind and is now caught up. They did work on the Kruger L21 Wolf, which, as we all know, is released, but you'll be happy to know, those of you who did pick it up, that the glass shader being excessively worn is being fixed. The Drake Ironclad and Ironclad Assault are progressing towards their white box reviews. The RSI Aurora and the Aegis Hammerhead both kicked off to bring them up to current standards. There you go, folks. Fixing first their cockpit dashboards as well as physicalizing components. The Aurora is desperately in need of this, considering it is the original ship that CIG sold, and I think the vast majority of backers in this game only own an Aurora, and right now it's not fit the purpose in the game. This is a long time in coming, so I'm glad to see this one going on. The Hull B has entered pre-production. The RSI Medevac and Triage that we mentioned earlier are continued on their way to release, with bug testing and bug fixing being the focus. And interestingly, they say some of the team, right after this talking about the Apollo, they say some of the team moved on to a related but unannounced ship. What could that be? And finally, the Perseus has been prepared for its level of detail Zero review, some more additional lighting and detail passes being done, and the Drake Kraken has continued through pre-production. Now, the core gameplay teams got busy for August. We got a bunch to go over for here, but they were heavily involved in the 4.3 release, of course. They continue to focus on freight elevators and further fixes to the issues to put them into an unstable state, and improvements to the debug tools. They're looking into a large range of other widely reported issues, but that is a damn good focus for them to be on. And to be fair, the live environment, the elevators have improved. They're not fixed entirely, but they have improved. They worked on the improvements and the changes to the medical ship functionality, and basically even general respawn flow improvements. They're about to close out the unique behaviors and attack moves of a new creature, an unannounced one. They updated the engineering screen, to show the rate of heat change for components and various fixed bugs. Now here's a big one, and I will read this whole thing out for clarity. Quote, for item recovery, the team added the ability to disable components for ships that have been claimed. Additionally, items will now display a timer until they become bricked after they've been claimed by the original owner. This is also displayed to the player as part of a notification when an item is bricked and a player attempts to use it. Now this is being done to prevent duping. A lot of people like to take the components out of their vehicle, blow it up, claim the vehicle, and then they get the duplicate components back. But at the same time, they want to allow for piracy so you can actually loot components. Now you're going to have a time frame to do that after they have claimed the enemy player that you've taken their ship from. After they've claimed it, you will have a limited time to get those components and resell them. I'm not sure how this is going to work, but it needs to happen because people can duplicate components and sell them, and it's make ridiculous amounts of money. They did further work on control surfaces and made improvements to the aerodynamic simulation where implemented, so ships flying into atmosphere will work differently than out in 0G. They did further work on implementing Maelstrom in IFCS, which means destroyed parts will now reduce thrust effectiveness on ships, for example, and help the design team in better defining a ship being inoperable even if not fully destroyed. They worked on various bug fixes and polish tasks for quantum travel, including, get this one, NPCs not being able to perform solo jumps. I haven't seen that in game at all yet, so I'm looking forward to that. They made additions to the quantum interdiction system, including now interdicted ships will now have markers on them, so that it's more obvious to players who are performing the interdiction that someone is there. Turret weapons are now prevented from firing when aimed at the host vehicle, which kind of is a no-brainer. They made various improvements and polish passes on radar and scanning, which we have yet to see in game FPS 1 at least, but also improvements to the ship radar and scanning. And the inventory rework progressed as well, and they implemented proximity looting, which will allow players to loot from multiple nearby inventory containers simultaneously. So a box, a dropped armor piece, and a body. This is friggin' awesome. And the new UI also had filters and search implemented. We've seen a picture of this in Inside Star Citizen, I think it was, a while back, and I put a post of it, or picture of it, up in another video. This is something that is direly needed. The inventory system is, yeah, at least something to be desired. The economy team is looking into changes to buy and sell prices of FPS weapons, armor, and consumables. I would actually like to be able to do that properly. They're also updating the profit margins for salvage vehicles in order to revitalize the salvage of vehicle components, which is kind of nice. Salvage was one of the first mission types or career types to be more fully developed than the others, but then it's kind of sat in a limbo where it's not really doing anything to help you advance the events that come out. We'll have to see, but salvage does need a little bit of a touch. Now, as we're all well aware, the mission design team was pretty much busy as hell working on the new ASD Onyx facilities, which we currently have in live only 2 of the 3 wings available, and 4.3.1 at Wave 1, like I said, is now bringing in the Science Wing, the 3rd one. They've also been trying to improve the mission generation system so that we're not all being shoveled into the same few areas for missions, which has been improving. I'm not going to lie on that. And they're also working on bringing back older locations and existing missions and expand the pool of locations for players to go to. And finally, the narrative team obviously worked on the ASD Onyx facilities and what's going on there and how players discover what's going on there and the background story about it. The online tech team did online tech stuff that I don't properly understand because I'm not a programmer. Description, pardon me, link in the description below. And the R&D team focused on analyzing performance and optimizing engine and game code. And VFX, well, VFX team worked on making everything look better, which bonus on them. Star Citizen's one of the best looking games out there, so keep up the good work, folks. And that is it for our Star Citizen weekly briefing for this week. Like I said, we had quite a bit to go over. I think that these medical changes, and especially the changes to the beds in vehicles, is going to be a huge one in the way the verse plays and who you come across and how people can take on the larger events. I'm interested to see how this goes. If it's too much of an overextension, if it's not enough, or if it's just right to balance out the game between the PvP, PvE aspects of it. It's interesting. The monthly report also gives us a lot of information. I'm just right now crossing my fingers, not holding my breath, but crossing my fingers and toes, hoping that next year Squadron 42 comes out and just blows my socks off with a single player game. I'm hoping that we see something about it at CitizenCon in the next month or so, but I'm not holding my breath about that. We don't really know yet. In any case, that has been the information, folks. If you found this video useful, if you found it helpful and informative, you thought I did a good job, give me a thumbs up. Down if you didn't, as always. Subscribe if you're new, if you want to see more. Sound off in the comments below, as always. And until next time, I've been Rage at Games, and I'll see you in the verse. Bye-bye.